Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Seth,
And this is Never TMI.
where we talk about real things.
And nothing is ever off limits.
Nothing, including today's topic.
Yes.
Which we're going to, I guess, talk a little bit about relationships today. I feel like it's been a while since we've talked about that, but
I feel like it's very fitting. Just lately, we kind of
yeah.
want to, it'll definitely be a vulnerable one just because I feel like we've just had a harder time lately. And in the spirit of Never TMI, we're just going to kind of invite you guys in to where we're at and the things that we've kind of had a difficult time with lately and just all of it. So, I don't know. Do you want to kick it off or no?
I mean, yeah, I think the heart of the conversation, and this I feel like is part of our, I don't even know if I would say, it's just like the season that we're in, like relationships. Where does a relationship fit into like marriage and our marriage? Like where does that fit into our daily lives and the struggle of striving for a good marriage and wanting a good marriage and actually having a good marriage? Like, you can have a desire for something, but it not manifest itself. And the amount of work that relationships take. Like, I think that's something that we've definitely, I know we've said that many times on the podcast. And so just kind of touching on that today, but in light of, I feel like, we've had definitely some rough patches in this past month and a half. And I say that because ever since getting a marriage counselor, this past year, we probably meet every I'd say every 4 to 8 weeks. So, about every month and a half to 2 months. And that's kind of when I think of our marriage in chunks of those time frames between counseling sessions. And I would say between our last counseling session to today, we've definitely had some rough arguments, not on the same page. And to me, I'm interested to hear your thought, but to me as the man of the household and with what I'm working on and going through, it comes down to priority of the marriage, priority of the relationship with Jackie. And my personal opinion is that marriage should be priority number 2 in life. And I feel convicted, I would say even in this past year of really trying to live a life of priority and like knowing what my priorities are and then letting my days reflect. Like I want, when I look back on my day, I want it to reflect my priorities in life. And for me, priority number 1 has to be spiritually, like a relationship with God. And that when that's off, I feel like all the other priorities are off. So that is my first priority. Second priority is my relationship with Jackie, my marriage, our marriage. And that also gets the short end of the stick. And when I look back on this last month and a half, it's very telling that 1, spiritually, I haven't been consistent. And 2, I also haven't been putting in the effort and just the hard work for marriage. And I think as a man, I'm definitely taking full responsibility of that. And know that it's on me. Like if our relationship is rocky, it's up to me. Like if it's meant to be, it's up to me kind of mentality. Like I can't sit and sulk and expect something to happen. And so that's kind of where I see it. What about you?
I mean, yeah, I agree with all of that. And I would say for me, where for you it comes down to priority, I feel like for me it's more like, which, they go hand in hand, but I would say like intentionality. So like you said at the beginning, a great marriage is not just going to happen. You can't just want it really bad. Like you have to do something about it. And we had a conversation the other night about that. It is up to us. And I feel like sometimes, especially lately, there can just be like a lack of intentionality. And I would say from both of us. And it's always hard because I feel like issues, like each other's issues, work off of each other. So like, I mean, like, intimacy wise, if we're struggling intimacy wise, that affects you and you act out of that. If we're struggling, and then in turn, it's like you're less emotionally in tune, you're less sensitive, less whatever. That affects me
Right.
intimacy wise, So it's like, I feel like, and I think we don't always give ourselves enough credit when it comes to like the fact that we have 3 kids and, we're 2.5 months postpartum.
Yeah.
So physically, hormones, everything, it's just there. That is a factor. And I feel like I can sometimes be like, oh my gosh, what is happening? What's wrong with us? But it's like that is a very real reality that we're dealing with. As wonderful as it is, I do feel like that absolutely takes a toll.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Well, and I think that is the struggle of living a life of priority.
Yeah.
Because like we're inundated with so many things in a single day.
Yeah.
But the challenge is to keep your priorities in check.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, when I say priority, I don't necessarily mean that time, like I would say that there's different things that go into telling if something is a priority or not. Part of it is time, but for me to say in this season of life that Jackie gets the second most of my time, or even to say that like if God is my first priority, that I spend the majority of my time in my day like in a
Yeah, it
quiet
doesn't
time or
have
something.
to line up that
That
way.
that's not necessarily how I see that, working. But she has to be like, and it's kind of, and I think in relationships, it comes down to how does the other person feel about it. Like, does Jackie feel like her love tank or her cups are getting filled in a day? And I'm reminded, I'm reading the 5 love languages right now for children, and it reminds me a lot of the original book, The 5 Love Languages, which is for adults and regular relationships, but there's a book specifically for kids, and it's the same concept. It just applied to like children and trying to understand what their love language is and love them in a way, but the concept is the same as the essence is knowing that people love and like receive love and give love in different ways. And if you don't, if you love them in ways that maybe they don't receive it best, you're not filling up their love tanks to where they can then operate optimally in the relationship. So with Jackie, I definitely see that, and I'm reminded, her primary love language is words of affirmation, and so to me, that's my number 5. That's her number 1, and it's easier for me to love Jackie in other ways that aren't affirming words. To me, I'm so logical. Words that and I think part of it is today's society. People say things and don't follow through with it, and I'm not saying that Jackie doesn't do that, but like for me, words just they don't carry quite the weight that maybe they should or used to. So, but I have to remind myself that they do mean a lot to Jackie, and it takes work and it takes a lot of intentionality for me to sit down and come up with, oh, what is something that I could say that's not me just saying it, but I'm meaning it. Like there's truth behind what I'm saying to her, but I know that it's also going to like fill up her love cup for words of affirmation. And so that that takes a lot of work. I feel like I kind of got off on that tangent there, but
No, I think like even in the car today earlier, I was telling Seth like I feel like it's almost better. I feel like for so much of our relationship, it's been, I don't know, like you have wanted to come across better than you are, and you've even said that before, like, which I get. It's like when you love someone, you don't want your full, vulnerable, sinful, messed up self to be like at the forefront. So sometimes it's easy to kind of like hide behind it or not share certain things, which is where a lot of like secrecy and all that starts brewing. It's like, I think of like a pastor, like they are never trying to lie and or cheat on their wife or something like that, but like I'm never surprised when it happens, because it's like, what do you expect? Like they're on such a pedestal, they don't want to be taken
Mm-hmm.
down from it. They're like, wow, all these people see me as this amazing person, and like but there's by no means whatsoever any excuse. So that's not my point. My point is like, I can see why it's easy in marriage and in certain spaces, in friendships. I can see why it's so difficult to be vulnerable, because you just want to uphold that, like, oh, you think I'm amazing, because that feels really good. And so I feel like for a long time, that is not necessarily something I've struggled with in life. I have many other struggles, but for you, that's always been a struggle. I feel like for your whole life, not just in marriage. Like that's something, and I think for men especially, that might be a common thing. But I was saying, like, I feel like it's better to me, even though it's more difficult, because I feel like we might be like arguing more, or disagreeing more, or sharing more, or I don't know, like we're not as like concealed when it comes to conversation or disagreements or opinions and all that kind of stuff. We're just like where we're at. So on that front, it's a little bit more difficult, just because it's like, whew, we are our real, vulnerable, open, honest, like raw selves. But I would prefer that 100% of the time over the fake, I'm putting on a front, I want you to think that I'm better than I actually am thing. And, I heard it was from Jackie Hill Perry like years ago. She had posted something, I think it was like a Twitter when she had it. I think she got rid of it. But it was like just talking about how husbands or spouses, if they make it too unrealistic, if they present themselves in an unrealistic way, in a a holier than thou way, then it makes submission for wives difficult. It makes it, unrealistic for them, because if you're living at this standard that's not even real, and it's like, man, I'm in my word every day, and I'm spending hours praying, and I'm fasting, and I'm wonderful, and I'm just on it spiritually and all that kind of stuff. If you're not showing like the vulnerable hard parts, or the failures, or the you know the messed up parts that aren't so pretty, all we see as a wife is like the perfection. So it's like, well, I know I messed up, and so to submit to that, or to come under that, or alongside of it even, it's like I felt for so long that you were just like amazing, unattainable, and it's like, oh, I'm nothing. And so in a sense, it's like it feels better this way, and it's like we can work together now. I don't have to pretend I'm better than I am. You're not pretending you're better than you are. Let's be real, let's be vulnerable, let's be open and honest, even though it might like stir up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's more realistic and refreshing to come alongside of you as your wife, and to like do life with you, instead of like just looking at you like,
Mm-hmm.
man, he's got it all together and he must think I'm awful, because that just affects my self-esteem and stuff like that. So I feel closer to you. I feel like I know you better. And like the challenge of loving you well, when I know all the crap and all that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know before. That is the hard part. That's where the work comes in, and like the choice of being intentional, and choosing to love you, and choosing to be kind, and choosing to respect you. Like, it's not just going to happen. So that's where like the hard part comes in, and that's where I think I've had a hard time. Is like, okay, here you are, you're real, I love you, but like it's harder to love this version, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's hard to love anyone in their true vulnerable self, whatever. When you have all the crap with the beautiful, it's like, it's a little bit harder, and I'm sure for you too. So that's where the struggle for me has kind of been lately. It's like, okay, with everything, do I really, really love you? Because it will put my words to the test, you know. Do I love you for real? Because love is not a feeling, it's a choice. Am I loving you
Mm-hmm.
with all of that, you know?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to loving someone well and loving them
Mm-hmm.
according to the way that they want to be loved and prefer to
Mm-hmm.
receive love. And
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
and I think that is where a lot of the work comes in. And like, even for me, I know like, you know, I know we have our next counselor meeting coming up, but just thinking about like, okay, if I'm if I know that, and I feel like, you know, the five love languages is such a practical step in any relationship, no matter where you at, no matter where you are at,
Mm-hmm.
to getting back on the road to like, you know, reconciling or just
Yeah,
being in good standard. Like
yeah.
thinking about where we're at now and what do you do to like get to a better place. I think that would be one of my first recommendations as just like to try something
Mm.
is try showing acts of love in
Yeah,
their
like even
number
writing it
one love
down.
language. Like, yeah, and so whatever that looks like serving them, meeting them in that place to love them the way that they prefer to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, for me, that takes a lot of intentionality and even putting it on a schedule or like,
Yeah.
you know, priority. I think back to the verse that says, you know, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And
Mm-hmm.
like when it says seek first, I think I always, originally I thought that meant like first in the day. Like if you're my first priority, or if you, you know, if my marriage is the priority that I'm focused on now, like that's got to be the first thing I do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that quite means that. I think that's part of it, but like kind of like what we said, it's like um, first can definitely mean like first thing of the day. And if you know Jackie is my second priority, then it's like okay, if I wake up and have a quiet time, now what can I do to serve Jackie? What can I do to focus on her? But first, I think also means like in choices throughout the day, considering Jackie as the second priority in the decisions that I make. And obviously, we have schedules. You know, there's balance to everything,
Mm-hmm.
and I think balance is a huge key to life. So like, if it comes down to like this happened the other day, it's like I come home, Kennedy is super excited to see me, and immediately she gets my attention, and it's just like I was gone like all day,
Mm-hmm.
and then Evan comes up, and it's just like the kids became the priority in the moment
Mm-hmm.
more than Jackie did, and I know that hurt her feelings because it's like by the time I say hi to the kids, they're running up to me. Jackie's feeding the baby in the chair. She can't like quite get up. I didn't make her the priority in the situation to go say hi to her first.
Mm-hmm.
Like those those are the moments where it's like, no, if my marriage is more of a priority than my kids, which I think that it should be, then I need to model that to myself, to my wife, to our kids. Like that's got to be the,
Yeah.
you know, in the home, that's got to be the vibe that I put off. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so if I'm saying that to live that out, if I come home from work, I'm gonna go straight to mama, give
Mm-hmm.
mama love first. The kids, you know, they can run up, they can hold on, they can
Yeah.
come along for the ride. But like I'm trying to find where's Jackie so I can give her my love first. Like that is another way of, I think, prioritizing.
And it sounds like, well, not to me, but I'm sure to people, it sounds like, oh, it's like not that serious. It's not that big of a deal. But it's interesting because growing up, like that's the example that was set in front of me.
Mm.
And I'm sure it was not a big deal growing up. Like I don't think I ever remember thinking about that. Like, oh, he always says hi to her first and he always goes and finds her and he shows his appreciation and gives her a kiss and hug and whatever. Never once did he like walk in the door and like, and they're young, but still, it's like it was never like, and there's seven of us, so like it was never like, I never saw that like him go to any of the kids first. It was always, always, always he's gonna walk in the door. Where's mom? I'm gonna find mom. So obviously in the moment that never mattered, but like when I was sitting in that chair and he just was like running to them or they were running to him and he's laying on the bed and jumping and and I literally was like, something just feels wrong about this. Like that doesn't feel very good. And it wasn't like, I don't know, it didn't hurt my feelings in a sense of like, you like them better than me or you care about, it's like I know where I stand, but I don't know, like those little things can build up and it can, over time just be like, man, I don't even know why I don't feel like a priority, but I just don't. And so to us that kind of mattered. And I'm sure like if I have to think about like in the morning coming downstairs, they're kids, they're going to be a little bit more like, oh, mommy, so obviously that feels good. And it's like, oh, let me give you guys a big hug. But it's like, it's something I have to think about too, because I'm like, let me go find daddy first. So they know too. Not only so he knows, but so they know and are aware of like, he comes first. We're together. Our relationship matters. And then the last thing I'll say is like, when it comes to intimacy, for me at least, there was a time in our marriage where I was way more like, I don't know. How do I say it? Like sexually, it was more of a desire for me. So like I wanted to have sex with him more than I felt, it coming from him. And that was just the phase of life we're in. I was chilling in California. Life was good. No children, no stressors. I worked out every day. I got outside. I got to chill on the beach, and he was like in a trailer all day, stressed, lots of responsibility. I had no responsibility other than to like make dinner, and I think I started at like 1:30 p.m. Poured myself a glass of wine, and had time to make dinner, and I loved it. So like that was just the phase of life that we were in, and so I feel like that has changed now, and I feel really busy. I feel stressed. I feel like, I'm working, I'm a mom, I'm this and that. And, he's working, he's a dad. We have the same ish responsibility, but I just don't feel like it's not as like a top priority for me. It's not like everything's just so peachy and wonderful. And I'm like, let's have sex because I'm so, free and whatever. So it definitely is, it's more of like an intentional work phase, but I have to be careful not to let that be on the back burner because I know that's where, and I've said it before, like one time my sister was talking to my mom and was like, man, we are just so off and we've fought so much. And the first thing she said was like, have you guys had sex lately? Because like sometimes that's it. Sometimes that is the issue, that is the root of the issue. Like men, especially, and I will say even in a time that I was more like it was on my mind more, like it still affects him, men, the way that they're wired, like it just like unlocks them emotionally, and I can tell he's kinder and sweeter and more sensitive, and I can sit and be like, you're so mean, like all I want, but I know I'm not filling one of his cups. If I'm not intentional about that and I just let that go for a while, like then that's absolutely going to affect his self-esteem. That's going to affect his attitude towards me. That's going to affect the way he feels towards me. His, not necessarily his love for me, but like his actions and just how, it all goes hand in hand. So I can't just not have sex with him, but expect to wake up to this like super sensitive, sweet, kind, tender man who's pursuing me. Like, I have to do the work on my end too, whether I feel like it or not. Words of affirmation for him, and I'm not saying his love language is sex. It's just a side note point. But like, if he's putting an effort to love me in the way that I receive it, like I need to be focusing on like, I don't know, your buckets, and one of them is sex, whether I'm, and it's on the top of my mind or not. That's just something that I have to be more intentional about thinking about. And I think that's in this season, like I haven't quite gotten out of like that postpartum lockdown feeling. It's hard to get out of it, especially nursing. Your body is, and your hormones are just focused on like the baby. So that's been really tough.
Yeah.
But it's also something I like am aware of and need to work on, but I'm sure that's added to the stress and frustration and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think, part of the reason we're talking about this is because we value the marriage relationship,
Yeah.
extremely high. And again, that's what we think. You guys might not think that, or you might think your kids come first, or maybe you prioritizing your wife doesn't look like going to your wife first, and you are totally fine with your kids coming up, and like we're sharing our experience with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one reason we do value relationships so high is the fact that if mom and dad don't have a healthy relationship between each other, it directly affects, like, your kids are going to see that, and that's what they're going to grow up with.
Yeah.
And you were kind of talking about it, but I've also recently, like, this has been reinforced in me, is just the way that we conflict, the way that we resolve conflict. Like, our baseline for that is what we've grown up with, and that the environment that we've grown in.
Yeah.
And so, like, we've grown up in two completely different households, and good, bad, or indifferent, like, that is the baseline.
Yeah.
And so, like, but we have our own vision for our family. We have, through guidance and counseling, like, we're also changing and forming that vision.
Yeah.
As well. And so, like, it really does help. One, it takes a lot of work to change your mindset. Like, you actively have to be renewing your mind to what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I think, to do that really does take getting new examples, or like finding someone who you want to emulate. And like, I think that's also extremely important. And talking to those people, like, what does that look like for you? What is a good, like, if you grew up and you thought the relationship that maybe your parents had was bad, what's a good relationship in your life that you can model and start to observe the tendencies or things that they do? How do they handle certain situations? Likewise, if you have, if you grew up with maybe a great relationship to model, like, you're going to portray those characteristics, but also, like, what are the negative characteristics that maybe, like, you could improve on? Like, thinking, and kind of, not to overanalyze it, but just like you are essentially a sum of the people and of the environment that you've grown up in. And so, is that what you want, or do you want to change it? And that, I think, is up to us to decide and make choices, and to actively work on those things. Again, requires work. Relationships require a lot of work. I think that is always kind of been our motto.
And it's such a gift to have examples too. Like, it's such a blessing. Like, my parents were not perfect, there's things that I loved about the relationship that I absolutely, it's like a standard for me. And then it's really cool to be able to look at the things that like I never really thought about, but I'm like, that probably wasn't good. Like you know, they did so many things right, and I wouldn't even say this was one thing that they did wrong. It just for me was like, I don't know if I want that. I did not. I didn't ever see them conflict. So like they and maybe that's a good thing. But I think my personality, like I never really saw any of the issues that they had. It would just be like, oh, they got into an argument and who knows what it is, but they're both off. And, mom seems salty, dad seems distant. Like, I don't really know what happened. And they always resolved it. And it was like the next day they'd be fine. But I think it's cool to be able to look at your parents and see, because it's in you. And that's something we talked about last night, is like, it's in there whether you like it or not. That's your reference point. That is what you know. That's what you're used to. So whether you like it or not, it's going to come out, and you need to replace it if it's something that you don't like. So yeah, like I think it's really important to kind of analyze, like, what did I grow up with and how am I handling conflict, and how does that resemble like the way that my parents might have handled conflict. Or if you had like a single parent, like, and you never really saw them conflict, then like, what does that look like? Where did you grab your whatever? I can like pinpoint where I got certain qualities from, hands down. And I think that's important to be able to do, so that you can either work on it, replace it, find a better way to do it, or emphasize it, like, oh, my parents did this really well and I really liked that. Or whatever, even as just me as a mom, like, what did my mom do that I like, whatever. But yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Last thing I would say is, and again, it kind of goes back to the mindset shift, but as much as we can learn from good and doing things well in the right way, I feel like we can learn equally as much, if not more, from failure. And so like viewing failure as not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Obviously it's something that we want to move. I think failure becomes a bad thing when you accept it and you live in it. But if you can take it and learn from it and tweak it and figure out, because you can do the right thing and get a good result and not understand why.
Yeah.
But if you fail at something and you understand why you failed, and you gain the understanding that, oh, if I don't do this, then I get a different result. That, I think, is where you really gain understanding.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of take it and make it your own. And not to say that you can't do that with good things as well, because you can be definitely intentional with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, failure is just a mindset that, just because you maybe grew up in a bad environment or something, that doesn't dictate who you are today or your future. So
It doesn't have to.
yeah. But that's all we have for today. Just want to drop a tidbit on relationship. And yes, we are in the thick of it.
On our relationship, yeah.
We are actively looking for ways to put in work and reminding ourselves as much as we hope to remind you guys as well, that there's always hope. And relationships require a lot of work, but they're definitely worth it.
And commitment. Like, I think we owe it to each other to know that we're going to figure it out. So like, as much as in a moment I'm like, I literally am done, I can't do this anymore. Like, I want you to always have the safety, which I'm sorry if you don't, but like, my goal is to like have for you to have the safety of like, and I think that. I think it's just, I can look for a reaction because you don't give me one all the time. So like, I'm like desperate for a reaction. I used to argue with my sister, and she just would just stand there, and I'm like literally seeing red. Smoke is coming out of my nose. Like, I'm angry. yelling, and she's just like, looking at me, nothing. And that is literally how it can feel arguing with us sometimes. Because I'm like, I need something from you. Like, and the more that I'm aggressive, the more like mellow you become because you don't respond well to it. So, my point is, I'm sorry if you don't feel, the safety of the fact that I'm here, but I did just get our wedding date tattooed on my arm, so I think, I'm here to stay. But yeah, like you owe it to each other to know that like we're gonna get through it, we're gonna be fine. And to not just like let things sit and settle as badly as I want to sometimes, because I'm like, oh man, I'm so hurt. Like I don't want to just go back to normal. I want you to know how terrible that was and how mean that was and how much that hurt me. But it's like we can't do that. So yeah, like it sounds really traumatic, like, there's hope and all that, but it is true. Like I know obviously you and I are fine and are going to be fine. There's just lots of work that we need to continue to put in that's not going to go anywhere. There's never going to be a time. There's seasons like in life forever. So we will be in our 70s conflicting and having a rough time with whatever it may be. And I think if you have that understanding, then you're going to be okay. Because, if I set the bar too high and I'm like, man, we're always going to be great. And any rough patch is scary and all that kind of stuff. Like, no. To have the safety of like, we're going to figure it out and there's going to be tough, seasons down the road, which make the really good, sweet seasons that much more special and enjoyable. I think that you'll be fine, and that's what I have to remind myself. But thank you guys for listening, and we just love and appreciate you guys. It always means a ton when you guys leave a rating or a review. It just helps us to, get out there a little bit more. And we just really, really appreciate it. And I mean, genuinely, anytime someone is like, oh, I listened to your podcast and I loved it, like it makes me so happy. It means the world. We do this for you guys because we love and appreciate you guys. And it's an honor to be able to be honest with you and share with you. And sometimes it can be scary, but overall, that is, what we chose and willingly signed up for because we love it. It really means a lot. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys. Again, I'm Seth.
And I'm Jackie.
This is Never TMI, and we are signing off.
Peace.